Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. As I'm sure you all know, today we are about to start the City Council meeting in about half an hour. And I just wanted to clarify that at this meeting, the vote that will be taken, or the votes possibly that will be taken, are not going to be on the actual tax Amazon legislation itself. It will be on a debate that will happen today on which committee in the City Council should chair the discussion of the tax Amazon legislation. So I first of all wanted to welcome you all and thank you all for joining us. Some of you may be working from home. Many of you may have been laid off or have your hours cut. It is a very difficult time. It is demoralizing and it feels like we are all isolated. And that's why it's so critical that we join together as at many town halls like this as possible, even if for a few minutes like today, so that we can connect with one another and remember that we are part of a movement, and also remember why it's important to build this movement today. That is what we're talking about today, actually. So this afternoon, in about half an hour, I'm going to be urging the City Council to allow my committee, which is the Sustainability and Renters' Rights Committee, to chair the discussion on our extremely important and potentially historic tax Amazon bill. As many of you know, what Councilmember Morales and I have put forward alongside the incredible movement that my office is a part of is a bill to tax the largest 2% of businesses in the city, like Amazon, but not just limited to Amazon, but exempting all small and medium sized businesses, basically exempting 98% of businesses and only taxing the largest and the most profitable corporations that are making money even during this pandemic, so that we are able to immediately fund $200 million worth of COVID-19 relief, cash assistance for the lowest income 100,000 households up to 100,000 households, including hopefully households that have lost their livelihoods. Just in the last weeks, we've seen the incredible, disturbing, alarming unemployment numbers from the Federal Reserve and from the Department of Labor that we are that we already 10 over 10 million Americans have filed unemployment insurance claims, and we know that that is an underestimate because gig economy workers, part-time workers, self-employed people, workers who are living, just, paycheck to paycheck, are going to be excluded. And so in the midst of that, what we are urging is that the City Council immediately pass this Amazon tax so that the largest and the most profitable corporations can pay up to $500 per month, a stimulus check for up to 100,000 households that need it the most for 4 months. If we can pass this immediately, then the checks can start coming in May. And then starting next year, we raise $500 million by taxing those same large businesses in order to provide funding for social housing and a Green New Deal. And this is going to be extremely important in this post-pandemic world, because not only will the housing crisis, which is already bad before the pandemic, going to exacerbate with rapacious corporate landlords and developers urging, really going after exploiting, continuing to exploit renters, and the potential of renters becoming homeless, their rents rising up, and all of that. So social housing is going to be even more critical. But on top of that, this program of building social housing would create tons of good paying union public sector jobs, and that will be in the context of a deep recession where we're going to see even more jobs lost. The Federal Reserve is predicting that 30% unemployment is going to be anticipated in the second quarter of this year. So now we're not claiming falsely that all these jobs will be created in Seattle, of course not, but our movement has an incredible opportunity, a historic opportunity, to show that when we can fight together, we organize, we can win, and we need this kind of working class stimulus as opposed to stimulus for big business at every level, at the state level and at the federal level. And if we can win at a city level, it will allow us to build a broader statewide and nationwide movement for similar demands. Now, why is today important if the bill itself is not going to be voted on? But today, you will see the City Council doing what they do often, the establishment using bureaucratic maneuvers to undercut our movement while pretending that they are on our side. So what we're going to see very likely today is the majority of council members led by Council President Gonzalez refusing to allow me as the as the office that has really spearheaded this legislation and is part of this incredible movement, refusing to let my office chair this legislation and pretending that this has nothing to do with the movement or the legislation itself. But I just wanted to clarify, what does it mean for the city council if they claim that they support what we're doing, they support the efforts of my office, then why are they virulently opposed to me chairing my own bill? What does it mean for them to do that? Is it just a routine bureaucratic mechanism, or is there something behind it? I just wanted to clarify that these are council members, including the president, who were among the 7 council members who voted to repeal our Amazon tax in 2018. And so the reason we're doing this town hall, in just for a half an hour, is so that everybody in the movement understands that what is going to go down today is not a neutral or an innocuous thing done by these council members. These are council members who, while some of them are progressive, some of them will say the right things, ultimately either are outright corporate politicians or do not have the courage to stand against big business. And what's going to happen in the coming days, and it will be reflected today, is that the council will come under enormous pressure, just absolutely intense pressure from big business, from Jeff Bezos, from Amazon executives, from the Chamber of Commerce to not pass this tax or to greatly water it down. And just this morning, the Seattle Times editorial board, which is a deeply conservative and pro-corporate establishment editorial board, wrote thoroughly filled with lies editorial, opinion editorial, where they say that this Amazon tax should be rejected. So we are up against the Goliath and we are the David, so we have to fight. So who's on our side? Who's the movement that could be undermined unless we really fight for ourselves? It's the thousands of people who have fought for this Amazon tax for 3 years now. Many of you started with us 6 years ago when we were fighting for $15 an hour. It's the 5,500 people who have signed our petition. And if you haven't signed it already, please watch the live stream feed to make sure you have the link. If you're not receiving emails or text messages from my office and you want to sign up, make sure you look at the email address that my staff is flashing on the screen so that you can sign up. It's also, the movement also includes the nearly 1,200 people who have written to the city council in just the last few days, urging them to pass the legislation and for the discussions to happen in a committee chaired by me. And last but not least, I just want to clarify that the city council establishment will accuse our movement of not compromising, of not understanding the rules. I want to make sure everybody here, hears from me loud and clear. We absolutely understand all the rules. What is happening is the city council establishment using backroom bureaucratic maneuvers. And what they would have preferred is that we had not discussed this in public at all. So what is going to happen today is we may not win this battle today, but what we will have done at the end of this afternoon is expose the city council in something that they were hoping to do in the background. But we refuse them that. That's important. That's an important job of our movement, that sometimes we may win the war, but we will not win individual battles. But even when we don't win, we have to make sure that we keep exposing the political establishment that is not on our side. So that we will be accomplishing today. But stay tuned for our next steps to really build our movement to win the Amazon tax. Yes, we will be up against a lot of opposition, but nothing worth fighting for is ever going to be easy in this world. And that's going to be true during this pandemic as well. We have to fight alongside healthcare workers who are on the front lines. We have to stand with essential workers who are demanding hazard pay and safety protection for themselves. We have to stand with Boeing workers who are being told they have to use their own leave and they're not going to be paid by the executives. So we have a lot of work to do, including fighting for the Amazon tax. So stay tuned for the next steps. Make sure you're receiving emails and text messages from my office. And on Thursday evening, 6 p.m., don't forget to tune in to the town hall from my council office, where we'll be discussing concretely what to do next.
Great. Shall I just give a brief summary of the legislation and the challenges we face? Okay, this is Jonathan again. Very good to see everybody here on this Zoom town hall meeting. I've been asked to review a little bit about what the legislation calls for and some of the challenges that we are facing. Although Shama did a very good outline just now. The Amazon tax itself, the legislation that is being introduced today, would raise $500 million a year, every year, from the richest 2% of companies in Seattle. Companies like Amazon, Facebook, Starbucks, Comcast, big downtown law firms, and so on. Those with payrolls of greater than $7 million per year would be required to pay a tax of 1.3% on their corporate payroll. That's all, just 1.3%. And when those 800 do under this legislation, we will raise $500 million a year, every year, to fund essential human needs. Under the legislation that is sponsored by Councilmember Sawant and Morales, we would put $200 million this year into emergency cash assistance for up to 100,000 working class households who would receive $500 a month, May, June, July, and August, or for 4 months, to help cushion the blow of this coronavirus pandemic. We're talking about households that are low income, seniors, people experiencing homelessness, people who have recently been laid off or had their hours severely reduced, immigrant workers, people who are working the informal economy, perhaps because they're undocumented, all would be eligible to receive this cash, this emergency cash assistance under our legislation. But we know, as Shama said, that this isn't just a crisis for the next day or few weeks, that we have a public health crisis, but we're also going to be having a long-term jobs and housing crisis, which is why beginning in 2021, the legislation will devote the money toward building permanently affordable social housing. That's housing that is either owned or controlled by the people, with rent control at affordable levels, built green and built union. Over the next 10 years, with this level of funding, we can build 10,000 new affordable social homes in Seattle in the next decade. And that is going to take a significant bite out of the housing crunch that working class people are facing. So 75% of the money will go toward this social housing construction. 25% of the funding in 2021 and beyond will go to help build the Green New Deal in Seattle. We're going to be retrofitting existing homes to meet the standards of the Green New Deal, again, with union work, putting hundreds, if not thousands of people to work, converting, putting solar panels onto roofs, converting utilities to be more energy efficient and the like. And this is not only going to create jobs and help improve housing, it's going to lower the climate pollution that Seattle is currently responsible for. This is a tremendously exciting and transformative piece of legislation. And as Shama said, with the coronavirus pandemic, it takes on a new sense of urgency beginning today. And if there's anything else that you would like me to say, if you let me know, Adam, and otherwise I'll just pass the baton here.
All right, yeah, thank you so much, Jonathan, for offering that good summary outline of what exactly we're fighting for. Again, my name is Adam Zimkowski. I'm a legislative assistant with Councilmember Sawant. And yeah, we're really excited that people could join us for this watch party as we get set to introduce this really exciting and groundbreaking legislation. And really, I think that urgency that Jonathan left off with around the coronavirus really points to what we're talking about doing with this legislation. In short, what we want is, whether it's the coronavirus crisis or the affordable housing crisis, we want a situation where big business or the companies that have huge assets and reserves at their disposal. We want people like Jeff Bezos, with $150 billion in their bank accounts. We want them to pay the costs of these crises, and we don't want working people to continue paying these costs. So to that end, we recognized, really early that this tax Amazon legislation, we would need a movement in order to win it because of the fact that big business has such tremendous influence inside City Hall. And we had seen, as Shama mentioned, and a lot of us probably watching participated in the Amazon tax movement just a couple of years ago, and we saw how we won it after hundreds of people sweat, blood, tears. We won the Amazon tax only to see in an unprecedented way it repealed just a few weeks later by a council that previously had extolled its virtues, but then came under significant pressure from, of course, the Chamber of Commerce, from Amazon, and of course from the Seattle Times editorial board and right-wing media. Shama mentioned the opinion piece in the Seattle Times from the editorial board this morning, basically offering no alternative to this coronavirus crisis, trickle down economics, saying that we can't go after big business during the coronavirus. Of course, we couldn't go after big business just a few months ago either. We couldn't go after them when we needed to solve our affordable housing crisis. So it's clear that if you ask big business, or if you ask the city establishment, when can business pay its fair share, their answer is never. So there's, of course, an urgent need to build a movement, and precisely we need a mass movement because what we're fighting for is big stuff. $200 million in direct payments to the 100,000 lowest income households. And if council actually passed it, as soon as it possibly could, we could have those payments going to people as early as May. And then, of course, the $500 million every year after for affordable housing. But even in the context of this coronavirus crisis, which, we've seen, record unemployment filings, we know for a fact that renters, en masse by the thousands, are not able to pay basic bills. Even in that context, as Shama has noted, we see a city council that's so clearly not inclined to take immediate, decisive, bold action. And for that reason, we really thought it important to invite the public to this watch party, to lay the conditions for as many people as possible to tune in to the Seattle channel, and I know that we'll have links that we're going to provide that people can click to view it online. You can also call in. We want people to be able to see, as excitingly, Shama introduces this legislation, co-sponsored, of course, with Councilmember Morales. But then at the same time, it's really important that we as a movement are able to see the way that big business, the Chamber of Commerce, does its work behind closed doors, or in this case, in the little things, seemingly innocuous ways. Shama mentioned, the real possibility, the real hope that we have that, we're going to be expecting, as is always the case, that the legislation that we have worked on so hard together with the movement, in reality, it's the movement's legislation. As Shama indicated, we're going to propose that we get to chair the committee that discusses this legislation, that we're able to figure out how it proceeds. The establishment does not want that, as we've heard, and so we want as much as possible for people to be able to view this and to be able to hopefully weigh in. As people have noted, we've had well over 1,300, I believe, emails to City Council demanding that this Amazon tax for coronavirus relief legislation be passed urgently. demanding that the movement get a chance to participate as much as possible in these discussions, so that it be chaired, therefore, in a committee that Shama wants. Now, as we've noted, it is entirely possible, if not likely, that in fact this legislation will be put into another committee. We know that what that means is not just, it's not a small thing, meaning that this is a way that they hope to take some of the power out of the movement's hands and put it in the hands of establishment politicians, or at least politicians that the establishment feels that it can control. Our job in this, of course, is to advocate as strongly as possible, as we've indicated, for this legislation to go to the committee where the movement has the biggest say, and that would be a committee chaired by Councilmember Sawant. But at the same time, to recognize that that this battle is not going to be won or lost right here. We have a huge amount of momentum in this struggle. People will remember, it seems like a lifetime ago, but just in January, our movement had an amazing Amazon tax kickoff, where on a snow day we had 500 people packing Washington Hall to really say once and for all that we want this legislation passed. We want to address the affordable housing crisis, and we want to do it now. In the meantime, we've built an even stronger movement. We've seen poll after poll of people saying that big business should be taxed to address our affordable housing crisis. Of course, in the last few weeks, a month, the coronavirus crisis has upended things completely, and it was immediate. And we get a sense of what our movement, who's involved in our movement, and the ordinary people that are fighting, when immediately taking the proposal to the movement that we transform the first year of this Amazon tax legislation into coronavirus relief. It was something that was automatically taken up and recognized as something we need to do. Again, unfortunately, it seems, in conversing with ordinary people, it's an obvious no-brainer. But the City Council, it's clear, does not see that obvious step, nor does big business. And for that reason, we need to fight. And we need, if it comes into our committee, that's wonderful, and we're going to need to continue to fight. And if it doesn't get put in our committee, we need to continue to fight. So concretely, we've just got a few minutes before the City Council meeting is going to start, and we're going to have people leave this watch party and go to the Seattle channel to watch what happens, or to call in. But before we have people go to watch this council meeting and watch the introduction of the Amazon tax, I'm going to note a few concrete things that people can please do to help continue to build this movement and to make sure that this Amazon tax for coronavirus relief is passed as urgently as possible, and that we also get as much funding as possible for social housing and Green New Deal programs in the future. The first thing that people can do, and we'll have links that are provided as I'm saying this, is that this Thursday we have the second of our online town halls to address the coronavirus crisis. That's hosted by Shama Sawant. We had our first one last Thursday. It was 300 to 350 people watching at all times, a collective space where we could come together and hear different stories and then plan a fight back. Concretely, we heard from Amazon worker Matt Smith. We heard from a frontline nurse. We heard from Violet Labatai from the Tenants Union to really frame how the workers that are on the front line can ensure their safety, but then also how we can demand and fight for things like hazard pay and full pay for people who've been laid off. Also renters' rights as the rent comes due and more and thousands of people aren't able to pay, really pointing the way forward for that. This next online town hall, we're going to have a focus on the healthcare crisis that is, we know, going to rapidly become more of a thing as more and more cases we expect will be confirmed. And we also want to further map out the way that we're going to win this Amazon tax legislation. Another concrete thing, so please go to that online event and then share it with as many as people as possible. Call your friends and family, text them, talk about the need to get active in this movement. We've also, just with the final couple of minutes remaining, we've also got a tax Amazon petition that's been signed by well over 5,000 people. We want to take it to 10,000 by the end of the week to really let people know, especially as it becomes clear the establishment is dragging their feet on things, to really let people know that the community needs this coronavirus relief. We need massive funding for affordable housing. So as 2 o'clock rounds around, I'm just going to go ahead and thank people once again for joining this first watch party. We're planning to hopefully do this in the future to apply that public pressure when there's not still public comment available. So thank you so much for attending. There will be more in the future. Please attend the online town hall, 6 p.m. this Thursday. We'll of course send out links. And yeah, I'll direct people to the Seattle channel right now as we get set to introduce our Amazon tax legislation. And thank you so much, and we fight on.